Hi, everyone, and welcome. My name is Sarah Zia Ebrahimi, and I'm the program director here at the Leeway Foundation. And I'm joined today by an interpreter from the Deaf Hearing Communication Center. Thank you so much for being here. Today, we're going to be talking about Leeway's grant opportunities, but focusing specifically on the upcoming August 1st deadline for the Art and Change grant. So I'll start by giving a general overview about the grants that we offer, and then spend the second half focusing more in detail, going through question by question on the Art and Change grant application. If you have any questions while you're watching this in live time, you can email the questions to us at info, that's INFO, @leeway.org. Or if you're on Twitter, you can also tweet at us, and I will answer your questions in live time. If you're watching this video after the live broadcast, you can still email in a question, and we will get back to you with any answers. But hopefully, over the course of the presentation, I'll answer some of the general questions and concerns that you might have and provide some clarity. So for those of you who don't know much about Leeway, we are a regional funder. We fund individual artists living in Philadelphia and the surrounding 5 counties. We do not fund organizations. So we support artists and cultural producers, women and trans cultural producers and artists, I should say, who are working at the intersection of art and social change. And I'll talk a little bit more later about what we mean by social change. And when we use the term trans at Leeway, we're using it as an umbrella term to express all the different variations in gender for people whose gender identity might not match what was assigned to them at birth. And if you have more questions about what that means, you can contact us, or there's also more information on our website. So what we mean by social change at Leeway when we say that we're supporting artists and cultural workers who are using their work as a tool for social change is that we support artists that are using their work to somehow raise consciousness about a particular issue, to alter ways that we think about ourselves, about community, like a society, the culture at large. We support artists that have a vision of a more just world that they're creating, maybe in the content of their work, maybe in the process of how they create it, maybe in the ways that they collaborate or distribute and share the work. For some artists, it may be all of those things. For others, it may be a combination of those. But our role as artists is to imagine ways that our world can be better, ways that we can be in community together, and ways that we can create change. And so a big thing that we're looking for artists is, what is your vision more than just your reaction to some of the injustices that are happening currently in the world, but what is your vision of what could be different? We also, support work that is reclaiming traditional cultural practices, that particularly ones that are in danger of being lost, or maybe people who are reworking cultural practices to have a more inclusive sense to them. We support artists whose work are challenging the many forms of injustice and oppression that exist in the world, and work that is somehow looking to shift people's perceptions of power and how change happens in the world. There are a few things that we do not fund and do not see as social change. It's work that we think is important in the world, but is just not part of our funding priority at Leeway. One of those is art therapy. So if you are doing work where part of the process is healing or catharsis, we still need you to articulate a larger vision of social change beyond just that immediate therapy, which is very important, but not what we support. We also are at Leeway, one of the things is that we're very much in favor of supporting people who are from the communities that they're doing work in. That's not exclusively true, but if you are working in a community that you are not a part of, we want to make sure that you are understanding yourself as a bridge builder or a connector, and understanding what your role is as someone that's maybe bringing resources or opportunities. And when I say a community that you are not a part of, this can be in terms of race, this can be in terms of age. If you're someone who's working with young people and you're not yourself, it can be in terms of neighborhood if you're working in a neighborhood you're not geographically from. And I apologize for taking a moment, but I'm getting texts that this may not be working from a couple of people, and so I'm just going to do one administrative thing. And please be patient while I do this. Okay. I will continue in the meantime, and hopefully that technical issue will be resolved in the meantime. This is recording, and so if you're not watching it in live time when the technical issue is happening, we'll just continue. For all of our applications, we also have applicants pick what's called a social change intent, and I'll go into more detail about what these all are as we go through the application. But this is, again, part of our vision of supporting artists that are being intentional and strategic with the work that they do, of understanding what issue is it that they're trying to address or change in the world. So there are 3 main grant programs that we offer here at Leeway currently. One is the Art and Change Grant. This is a project-based grant of up to $2,500. So you're applying with a specific project proposal. There is no requirement in terms of how long you have to have lived in the greater Philadelphia area. So you could have moved here yesterday and still apply for the upcoming deadline. The only requirements is that you have to be woman or trans, be at least 18 years of age, live in Philadelphia or the surrounding 5 counties, and you cannot be currently enrolled in an arts program at a university. So you could be enrolled at a university studying something else, like political science, economics, something. But what we don't want is people who are trying to support their art projects in school through this grant, since we don't fund students. The deadline for this grant is twice a year. It is on March 1st and August 1st of every year. You can apply twice within the same year. So if you applied in March of this year and did not get the grant, you are welcome to apply again this August. There is no limit on how many times over the course of your life you can get the award. So we've had some grantees that have gotten it 6 or 7 times now. It just has to be a distinctly different phase of a new project. It has to be a distinctly different phase of a current project or an entirely new project. So in other words, you can't keep applying for the same project over and over again unless you're doing something new with it. You cannot be awarded the grant twice in the same year. So if you received the Art and Change grant in March of 2018, you cannot apply again for the August deadline. The all of our grants, the decisions are made by a panel of artists and cultural producers that rotates from year to year. So the panel who makes the decisions on the Art and Change grant are all local folks from the greater Philadelphia area. It is the same group of people reading the March applications and the August applications. So again, if you did apply earlier this year and didn't get it, and you apply again this August, your application will be going in front of the same group of people. But in March of 2019, it'll shift to a new group of people who will be reading the March and August 2019 applications. Everyone who applies gets feedback from the panel, whether or not you get the grant, which I think is a really fantastic thing, because no one likes getting a decline letter from a foundation, but often you're left with a question of like, what was it that made them not choose the application? And so in the case of Leeway, when you apply, there's usually a clear explanation. And if it's not clear, you also have the opportunity to call me or other staff members and get feedback in more detail on why it is that your project wasn't selected. The second funding stream that we offer is called the Transformation Award. The Transformation Award is a $15,000 unrestricted grant. It is a two-stage process. And so the stage one deadline is May 15th of every year. So that deadline has already passed for 2018, but is something that you could be thinking about for 2019 if you're interested. And when I say unrestricted, I truly mean unrestricted. You can use the grant for whatever you want. So it is not project-based. So people have used it to buy a house, to pay off student loans, to create a new project, to get dental work, to go to therapy. The idea is that it's supposed to support anything that you need at that moment in your life to help you move forward as an artist. In stage one of the Transformation Award, you are not allowed to provide work samples, so no links, photographs, or any kind of external materials. But if you are invited to stage two, then you are invited to share work samples at that time. So I should back up and say, for the Art and Change grant, we usually get between 75 and 100 applications per cycle, and about 20 to 25 of those people get the grant per cycle. So that's about 50 people per year. For the Transformation Award, it's slightly lower. I would say it's usually between 70 to 80 people who apply for the grant. And 20 to 25 of those people are invited to stage two. And then usually 8 to 10 people get the award. For the Transformation Award, you have to have lived in the greater Philadelphia area for at least 2 years. And you have to have been practicing your art form for at least 5 years. Now, in the past, there's been some misconceptions that this means that you have to be an elder or someone more established in your practice to get this award, and this is not true. I'm actually really happy to say that in the last couple years, the age range for this award has been skewing younger and younger. We've had people in their early 20s who've gotten this award, because if you started writing poetry at the age of 15, you're eligible to start applying for this award at the age of 20. So I encourage folks who think that they might not be eligible for that grant to challenge themselves to maybe apply and learn more about it, at least, and see if it is something you can try for. The last the funding stream that we offer is the Window of Opportunity grant, which we call the WOO for short. And this is a monthly deadline on the 15th of every month. This grant is only available to past grant recipients at Leeway. So if you have gotten one of our grants before any time in Leeway's 25-year history, you are eligible for this window of opportunity grant. This is meant to support particular opportunities such as, if you've been invited to exhibit your work somewhere and you need money towards framing, if you've been invited to perform somewhere and you need money to cover your travel costs. They have to be something that is a clear external opportunity, not a next phase in your project. So, for example, if you just want to apply to a film festival and you need money to cover the submission fees, that would not be eligible under this window of opportunity grant. But if you had already been invited to a festival where your work had been submitted and they want you to speak on a panel, but you need the money to be able to travel there, that is something that would be eligible for the window of opportunity grant. All of these grant opportunities are listed on our website, and you can get more information there. If you're watching this broadcast in live time, you can also ask questions that I'll address directly in the video. There's two ways you can do this. One is by emailing us at info, that's INFO, at leeway.org, or you can also tweet at us on Twitter. For those of you that have been trying to tune in for the live broadcast, I understand that the technical issues are now fixed. So I thank you for your patience for those of you that weren't able to connect at first. So I've gone over the three main funding opportunities at Leeway. I should also mention that we now have 3 new residency programs as well as these grants. These are right now only open to past grantees. I'm not going to talk about them so much in today's info session, but the information is up on the website and you're also welcome to follow up with questions. For now, I'm going to spend the second half of this info session going through the Art and Change grant application in detail and guiding you on how to best approach these questions. So the Art and Change grant application is available on the website either as an online form or as a PDF that you can download. You can also request a hard copy of the application to be mailed to you if you would like. You can do whichever one works best for you. I will say though that if you submit using the online form, the form closes down at 11:59 p.m. on the deadline day. So on August 1st at 11:59 p.m. it closes. I will say that I don't recommend submitting within those last 20 minutes. Most of the emails I get from people saying that they had technical difficulties are people that try in that last few minutes when there's really high traffic. If you submit using the online form, you should immediately get an email confirmation back saying that your form was successfully submitted. If you do not get that, you should email us immediately and say that you tried and it did not go through. We cannot be responsible. There's nothing we can do on the back end if there are any problems with the form software. So you want to make sure that you have a backup for yourself if something goes wrong. If you're doing a hard copy version of the application, the building we're in is open 24 hours, so you can come up to our office. So we're at 1315 Walnut Street, and we're in Suite 832 on the 8th floor, and you can put the application through our mail slot. So when you look at the application, the first few pages are our guidelines, which is a lot of information of just sort of what we do and don't fund. On the second page, there is a list of the social change intents. What we mean by the social change, which I talked about a little bit earlier. And then a few pages in is also the list of social change intents. If you'd like to follow along in live time as I'm talking, this is the PDF version that is available on our website at leeway.org that you can look at as I'm talking. The next page in the guideline is a list of artistic disciplines. This is meant to just be a guidance of figuring out what category to select, but a lot of people feel really limited by this list. And I just want to say that this list is really mostly just internal for us at Leeway to be able to track our outreach. So if we're, for example, not seeing many applications from musicians or from people doing crafts and textiles, that allows me to understand where I need to be doing more outreach next year or supporting more artists. And so the intention here is really just to help staff do a better job in our outreach. It's not meant to limit you. A lot of people want to choose multidisciplinary, and I want to caution you to not pick that unless you truly are multidisciplinary. And what I mean by that is, for example, if you are a dancer who's staging a performance, it's very likely that you're also working with video and sound design as part of that, but that doesn't necessarily make you a multimedia artist in terms of this application. In that case, for example, I would suggest that you pick performance as your primary discipline, and then you could pick media arts, for example, as your secondary discipline. And so try to communicate a specificity about what mediums you're working in. When you pick multidisciplinary, that specificity is lost, both for the staff and the panel who's reviewing your applications. So again, if you have questions in live time as I'm going through the application, you can email them to us at info@leeway.org, or you can tweet at us on Twitter. So the first part of our application is just collecting your address, name, some basic data from you. Again, this is just for our internal tracking. You get to pick what name you would like to be shared publicly if you are awarded the grant. That is also the name that we will address you by in the panel process and in all of our communication unless you indicate otherwise. You'll also see in the application that we ask you to provide age and residency documentation. This is just to prove that you were at least 18 years of age and also that you were living in the area. So there is a list of different types of documents that you can provide. If you have any issue with being able to provide, usually for people, the residency documentation can be a challenge. If, for example, you're living somewhere where you're not on the lease or mortgage, we do accept, any kind of bill. It can be a cell phone bill, healthcare, public assistance, anything that might be coming in your name to that address that just proves that that is an official address is what that we need. If you still can't do that, we've also been able to make provisions of having whoever is on the lease or mortgage write a letter and sign and, saying that you do live there. So if those things are a challenge for you in terms of the documentation, please reach out to us on staff and we'll find a solution. So getting to the main body of the application, the first part is the project information page. This is the first field you'll see is asking what your requested dollar amount is. The grant, again, is up to $2,500. I encourage you ask for the full amount unless you don't need it for some reason. This does not need to be an exact to the cent kind of number. So, you don't have to put in $2,152.12, right? We're not looking for that level of detail. The next field asks for your change partner's name, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. So we'll just put a pin in that for right now. Then it asks what your project start date and project end date is. Now, it's important to note here when you submit this application that we do not fund retroactively. and that it usually takes 6 to 8 weeks before you're notified about the grant. And so if you were applying for the August 1st deadline, you really don't want your project to be listed as beginning before October, just because it will make the panel question if you're already working on this project and it's already started before you're going to find out if you got the grant or not, do you actually really need the money if you're able to go forward with it without knowing? If this is a phase of a sort of larger iterative project, the dates that you are putting are the particular dates that you're working on this phase that you are asking for funding for. If you're working on something, it doesn't have to be in 2018. So it can also be a project that starts in 2019. That is okay. And these dates are approximate, so we're not the kind of foundation that are going to call you the day that end date is and say, where's your project? Is it done or not? What we will do is check in with you midway and see how it's going, and then see if you need to adjust the end dates. We understand that for most of the artists that we work with, there's so many unknown factors. So someone who was going to do a series of workshops, the place that she was going to use, the air conditioning broke, and so she couldn't do it for the whole summer and had to wait until the winter. So we understand that these kinds of things happen. The most important thing is communicating. So these dates are not meant to be locked in, but what they are is to give the panel a sense of like what the scope of the project is. So are you saying that you're going to shoot an hour-long documentary film in 2 months? They might question that because that seems pretty ambitious. Not impossible, but ambitious. And so they want to have a sense from you that, do you have a realistic sense of how much time it's going to take to be able to do the work that you're suggesting? The next section has the primary artistic discipline and secondary artistic discipline of your project. And again, I talked about this. It doesn't need to represent everything about your project, but it does need to at least give a sense of what are the primary art forms that you're going to be working in. And then the next section is the social change intent or vision of your work. And this is this list of different issues. So there's things like disability justice, economic justice, feminism. There's a bunch of different things that are listed here. And some people feel confused or unsure about what to pick here. There is no right or wrong answer. The idea is that you are going to pick what resonates best for you. So some people have said to me, well, for me, my definition of feminism inherently includes racial justice. And that is okay. And I agree personally. But what you'll do is you'll pick which one makes most sense for you. And then there's an opportunity in the application to define what that means to you. This is not about like the demographics of who you're working with or where the project is taking place. This is about what is your vision? What is it that you're trying to change in the world, that you're trying to address through your art and cultural work? That your project is centered on. Then in the next section, you're asked to give a brief, so that's 1 to 3 sentences, description of your project. Now this encounters about your project. So you want this to be enough detail without going too deep into like all the like super details, right? But enough that makes it interesting and catches the attention of the panelists. Because imagine it from their perspective that they're reading 80 to 100 of these, and on the panel decision day, they're jumping back and forth between all these applications, trying to remember who is who. And so this is kind of giving them that overview so that when they look at your application, they can clearly say, oh yeah, that's the person who's doing the series of music workshops in their neighborhood in North Philly, and so that they can remember this, like at least enough about your project to know what it was about. So again, if you're watching in live time and you have questions, I can respond to them directly. You can email us at info@leeway.org. Or you can tweet at us on Twitter, and I will directly answer your questions. If you are watching the broadcast afterwards, not in live time, you can still send in questions, and we will write a response to you. The next section of the Art and Change grant application is called the Experiences section. And this is a choice by Leeway to go against the trend of most foundations that fund individuals that ask for a formal resume or CV. So this is called an experiences page because we are trying to honor the various types of experiences that our artists have had that have happened outside of formal education or institutional settings. So a good portion of our artists have never even identified as an artist before applying for this grant, have never had any formal arts training. Their process of how they've arrived at this work has been totally non-traditional or non-linear. And I'm saying all these words in quotes because who's to say what the correct or linear way to arrive at this work is. But in terms of sort of challenging the mainstream conventions in the art world around this is our conscious attempt to open up more space to honor the different types of experiences that you may have had that have made you into the artist you are today. So you'll notice that the description says that these should be artistic, personal, political, or professional type of experiences. And I really encourage you to make a mix of these. So this should not read like a resume in terms of just, I performed at this place, I exhibited at this place, I got this award. If one of those things is important to you, you can put it there, but you should say another sentence about why that was important or significant to you. But we're also looking for very personal experiences as well, because part of our priority here at Leeway with our funding is funding vision and passion over traditional accomplishments, awards, and accolades. So we are more interested in what is at the root or heart of why you do your work than we are of who has formally acknowledged it with some sort of award or opportunity. While those things are very important, they're not the primary thing that we're looking for. So examples of personal type things you can put here. We've had grantees who have listed out growing up with parents who sold artwork at festivals and that they learned that that could be a source of economic sustainability or income from things that they created, their family created with their own hands. We've had folks that have talked about growing up with parents who were in a union and having to go to labor meetings and learning about the power of people that come together collectively. We've had filmmakers who have identified the first time they remember seeing someone who looked like them on television, and that sort of being the initial moment to spark the interest and passion to want to be a media maker. So there is an area where it asks you to list the dates of these experiences, and we don't need you to say, oh, well, this happened to me on December 2nd, 1982. It doesn't have to be exactly that kind of date. It can just be from ages 6 through 12, this was an experience I had. People have also listed personal experiences that have been really transformative in their life, like leaving an abusive relationship or coming out, something that has been a major step in leading you to where you are today. All of this information is confidential. None of it goes out publicly in your artist description. But what you're imagining here is if you could sit down to coffee or tea with one of the panelists and tell them, why is it that you do this work and why do you want to do this project? This is kind of what you're trying to convey there. It is not a formal resume. I can't stress that enough. And then, so you have to list at least 4 experiences. I encourage you to actually use all the space and do up to 10 if you can. just because, again, it gives you more opportunity to convey that passion and vision to the panel. And then you have a space where you can pick one of those experiences and expand on it more. So each of those experiences, you only have like 1 to 2 sentences to describe them, but then you can pick one of them to expand more into a full paragraph. There's no right or wrong answer of what to pick here. The only guidance I can give is like if there is something that is related to the project that you're proposing that you think would be helpful for the panelists to read, you could pick that. But it's really what do you want more opportunity to be able to tell the panelists about. Again, if you are just tuning in and you want to be able to ask questions in live time, you can email us at info@leeway.org, or you can tweet at us on Twitter and I will answer your questions in live time. Also, if you're watching this broadcast afterwards, you can still submit your questions and someone will get back to you with an answer. I've gone through the first couple parts of the application, and now we're going to go through what's called the project description area. This is a series of 6 questions that you'll need to answer. If you're using the online form, you're given I forget how many characters it is. I want to say it's around 1,400 characters, which is roughly a third of a page for each question. If you choose to submit a hard copy of the application instead, you can type this up in a Word document. And it doesn't matter how many characters you allocate per question. All 6 questions just have to be within 2 pages. So that is the one limitation. So some people prefer to do the hard copy application because then they can answer some questions longer and some questions shorter. Whereas in the online application, there's no minimum requirement, but the maximum is set for each of those questions. So that's really up to you of which one feels best for you. If you do the online application, I highly encourage you to type out your answers on your computer or somewhere else first, and then type them into the online form. Because if the form times out or accidentally deletes it, there's no way that I can help you recover that information. So it's great to have that written out somewhere else first where you can just copy and paste it in. So as I mentioned, there's 6 questions. The first question asks you to summarize your Art for Social Change project. In this question, you want to give us as much as you know about the who, what, when, and where of your project. And I think the biggest thing to pay attention to in question number 1, but throughout the application as well, is making sure you're explaining things that seem obvious to you, but that actually the panelists are going to need more context for. So for example, if you said, I'm doing a series of paintings, that sounds interesting, but what do you mean by series? Do you mean 5 paintings, 15 paintings, 50 paintings, 500 paintings, right? So giving us a sense of the scale of the project. Again, it doesn't have to be exact. It may change once you're in the project, but we want to get a sense of what is your vision of what the scale is of that project. Also, let's say your paintings are portraits. Okay, I mean, that gives me some sense of what the content of the paintings might be, but there's so many different styles. So are they realistic? Are they abstract? What kind of color palette are you using? Are they this small, or are they 6 feet high, right? So giving us a sense also of the visual style. A lot of times I see artists use really general terms of like, I'm making a documentary. Well, of course people know what documentary means, but even within that type of film, there's a lot of different styles of documentary. Are you doing traditional interviews with talking heads? Are you following someone in a day in the life? Is it a little bit more abstract? So give us as much of a detailed sense as you can about the style of the project. And just a reminder that you cannot put in links to external websites as part of this application, and you cannot include pictures or videos or anything else. So we're really relying on your description about the project and the work. The panelists are not allowed to Google you or do any other research on you, so they're only going by what's on the page here. So we talked about details about the, the scale of it. This also, if you are doing, for example, like a series of workshops or events or something, also, details about, like, is it 3 workshops or more? Is it the same group of people that you're bringing to each workshop, or is it a new group every time? How many participants do you imagine being there? Again, not to hold you to a finite number, but to give us a sense of what you are imagining. And in terms of the who and the where, like, as much of those details as you have set, you should share. But even if you don't have them all set yet, you could tell us the type of space that you imagine, right? And it's okay to be honest and say, I don't have the space confirmed yet, but this is the kind of space that I imagine doing this in, and part of what I need is money to be able to do this. So then the second question is asking you why this project is important to you. And this is another place, again, to convey some of that passion or vision of why you're driven to do this project. But you also can give more context here for why, for example, in this current political climate, you think it's important to be doing this project. You also should assume that you are talking to someone who may be outside of your artistic discipline. So we try to make sure that the panels have people that are coming from a number of different artistic backgrounds. But it's possible that if you are a dancer, that there's someone who's not a dancer on the panel that year. And so are you doing something, for example, that is very new or different in the dance community or in the theater community in Philadelphia? Don't assume that the panelist has that understanding. Like, make the case why this is really important to do this type of work. So it can be by discipline, it can also be community. So if it's something that isn't happening as much in the trans community or in the deaf community, or like actual geographical neighborhood where you live, you should make that case here of why you think it's really important to be doing this work. A lot of our artists don't claim the uniqueness of their work as strong as they could. So I encourage you also to give as much confidence as you can. And I'm not saying there's so many artists that we know that are on the ground doing incredible work, but in the context of their application, they're not claiming how unique that work is and how important it is. And so making sure, again, these things that may seem obvious to you are really clearly communicated in this application. In question number 3, this is the biggest question in the application in some ways. It's a place where I know a lot of people feel like it can be a hard hurdle to jump. But hopefully I'll explain it in a way that helps you approach it. It's a 2-part question. The first part is connected to the social change intent that you were asked to pick. So that was, again, that list of issue areas. You need to pick at least 1 social change intent, but no more than 3 of them. And this is the place that you will identify what that means to you. So you were asked to identify the social change intent of your project. And we're asking you to explain how your project engages with that social change vision. And then also to talk about the second part of this question. You're asked to talk about the goals and intended impact of your project. So keeping in mind with this conversation about impact, that we understand that no one project can change the world. But what we're interested here in this question is, what do you imagine could be different in the world about the way that we're in community together, the ways that we live together, the way policies are made, the way people think about each other, and how are you in your project reimagining that or addressing that in some way. So we're looking, how are you at the micro level at the smaller level, creating like a version of that larger change that you imagine. And so for some of you, this may be in the content of the project. So the kinds of things that you're talking about, drawing, singing about, like whatever the form is. For some of you, it may be the ways that the process of how you're creating it. Maybe it's collaborative with people in the community. Maybe you're doing it in some non-traditional way. And for some of you, it may also be in the ways that you choose to share it. So a decision to hang art on street poles instead of in a gallery at a museum is an example of like choosing to distribute it in a different way. Doing dance in a park instead of doing it on the stage of a formal performing arts center might be an example of that. So for some people, it'll be one of these. For some, it'll be some combination of all three. But again, to recap, we're looking at sort of in the content of your work, in the process of creating it, and in the ways of sharing it. How are you engaging with this social change vision? Right, so we can't all be Beyonce and be on stage with 100 dancers behind us and have millions and millions of dollars to do our projects or productions. But how are you at the scale that you are working at sort of trying to impact or move forward some of the change that you imagine in the world? Question number 4. Ask you to define your community or audience, and then what your relationship is to the communities that you work with. And then the third part is, how does your identity or who you are play a role in this? Now, community is a very broad term, and we're leaving it open for you to define. So again, it could be geographically based, of like a particular neighborhood. It can be in terms of race, religion, ability. So we're asking you to define sort of who is your community for this project in particular. And what you don't want to do here is say, well, my audience is everybody, right? As much as we all would like for as many people as possible to experience our artistic work, that is too broad for this application. We want to know who is the primary audience that you are creating this work or doing these workshops or whatever your project is. Who is the primary group that is for? Why? And how is who you are play a role in that? So this is particularly important when you are working in a community that you are not a part of. Again, so if you're working with young people and you're an adult, how are you giving those people, those young people, agency in the process? How are they making decisions and not just having an adult coming telling them what to do? If you're working in a neighborhood where you don't live and you're not from, what are ways that you're building authentic relationships with people in that community? What skills are you teaching to pass on so people in the community can continue that work without you? So we're looking for those kinds of things to be addressed here in that question about your identity. Most people here also list different intersections of aspects of their identity, of saying who they are. I'm a first generation immigrant, born and raised, lived for 20 years in Northwest Philadelphia, or whatever the description is that fits you and who you are, of giving the panel more of a sense of your background, the different intersections of your identity and how that informs your work. Question number 5 asks you how the project engages the audience. And if your project takes place outside of the greater Philadelphia area, how you are going to bring back here and connect it locally. So this first part of the question about engagement, again, for some of you, it might be in the actual creation of the work, or it might be in the process if you're doing workshops or some kind of events. It can be the ways that you're bringing people together. In those cases, you might think about engagement almost as sort of like, what is your outreach going to be? Like, how are people going to find out about this, and how are they going to get involved? If you're doing stuff that is event-based for your project proposal, the panel is often looking for your larger vision of how is this more than just being an event manager, right? Like, how is this part of larger movement building? What is your vision of ways that this might create community or sense of safety beyond just that finite moment in time when people come together? Are there other iterations of the project afterwards? The engagement might also be like if you're a performer, and you're breaking the idea of the fourth wall in theater, and there's ways that the audience is directly involved, brought in the process of a performance. That might be an example of engagement as well. So for some of you, it'll be how do people find out about the work or come to it. For some of you, it might be in the actual sharing of the work. But we are particularly interested in sort of how does this move beyond a singular event or singular project? How do you see it as sort of a larger movement building tool? And for the second part of this question of if it happens outside of the greater Philadelphia area, so we have funded a number of people who have traveled elsewhere to be able to photograph or document some community of folks or participate in something that's happening overseas or somewhere else in the US. There has to be some clear connection of how you're then going to bring that experience back to Philadelphia. So if in the example of doing photography somewhere else, is there some sort of exhibition or way that you're going to share back that work in the Philadelphia area and create some sort of engagement here locally? And the last question, question number 6, asks about your change partner, which we're finally going to address. I had mentioned it earlier, but said I would get to it. So this question is asking why you chose your change partner and what kind of expertise or support they will provide. So the change partner can be an individual or an organization, and they cannot, however, financially benefit from the project. So if it's another artist, for example, that you were going to pay to be involved in the project, that would not be a good choice for your change partner. What the role of the change partner is to be either someone who is a mentor. So let's say if you're someone who is an illustrator and for the first time you're taking the leap to try to do animation and do a film, maybe your change partner might be someone who has experience doing animation, who's saying, I'm going to help mentor this person along the way and be technical support for them when they have questions about how to do this new art form, for example. It could be an organization that's saying, we love this person to come in and do these workshops in our space, and so we're offering them space for free. If you are using an organization for your change partner, they need to be crystal clear in the change partner letter that they have to submit, which I'll talk about in a moment, that they're offering you space or services or whatever the partnership is free of charge, that they are not financially benefiting from the project. There are instances where, if you're doing a particular type of needlework and only your auntie overseas is the only person that knows how to do that cross stitch pattern, that maybe that person makes the most sense to be your change partner. But when possible, I think it's often stronger for it's someone local. And the strongest I've seen is if it's someone that's part of the community that you're going to work with. So we've also had change partners when, for example, we had a applicant who was a newer resident in a neighborhood and was trying to create a project that was linking longtime residents with newer residents in the neighborhood as a means of sort of resisting or changing the trends towards gentrification and creating more community unity. And that person had someone who was born and raised in the neighborhood write the change partner letter. That gives a sort of strong cosign or endorsement from the community, where you have someone from that community saying, yes, we know this person, yes, we trust them, and we want them to do this project. We even had someone apply who was working with young people ages I think like 10 through 15, and had one of the young people who was 10 years old write the change partner letter. So there's no limitation in terms of age, gender, or geographic location in terms of the change partner. So it can be individual or organization. They don't have to meet our guidelines. The thing that is key, though, is that they have to submit the change partner letter in order for your application to be complete. So their deadline is also August 1st. There's an online form with 3 questions that they can fill out. If they do that online form, it should automatically trigger an email that also goes to you that says your change partner has submitted your application, that part of the application, and your application is now complete. Or they can also send in a hard copy of answers to those questions. But your application will not be considered complete if that doesn't come in. And that's always the most heartbreaking calls that we have to make, of saying, hey, your application is fantastic, but your change partner didn't get their letter in time. So make sure that if you are thinking about applying for the August 1st deadline, if you haven't already identified a change partner, that's probably one of the first things you want to do starting today. And then maybe you even want to give that person an earlier date that they have to finish the letter by, so that you can feel secure that your application is going to be complete. Those 3 questions for the change partner are just asking what their relationship is to the project and to you as the applicant, why they believe that you are well suited for the project, and what they will bring to the project as a change partner. Now, the last part of the application is the project budget. This project budget, you're just asked it to list the expenses, so a short description of what the expenses are and the costs for them. Again, this is to get a sense of the sort of scale and cost of the project. So if you're saying that you need to buy a high-end video camera, but then you're only budgeting $300 for it, that might be a question for the panel of, does this person really understand what it takes to shoot a film with a high-end HD camera, for example. We believe strongly that artists should get paid. So if you are collaborating with other artists or performers, the panel will actually be looking for that in the budget. So if folks are volunteering in conjunction with your project, you need to say that explicitly in that question number 1 when you're summarizing your project, so that they understand that that's the reason why no one is getting paid in the budget. We have had people who are working with young people offer stipends for young people as well to be involved in the project, offering a mentoring and sort of leadership opportunity in that way. You can pay yourself as an artist. We do support that. I would discourage you from making the full $2,500 budget just to pay yourself. But you can put a good portion of it towards your time and maybe explain it in the project expenses of, like, I need 3 months of rent to be able to focus on this project, and here's what that costs. But make sure when you write out your project budget that everything that is in the budget is somehow explained in the body of the application. So if, for example, your project is working on a quilt, and in the budget we see a line item for a color printer, I might make an assumption of, like, oh, okay, maybe this person is going to print images on fabric as part of the quilt. But if there is nothing in the bottom of in the body of your application saying, part of the quilt will be printing out these old photographs onto fabric, then I don't know. And so the panelists shouldn't have to guess or question. Every single thing that is in your budget should somehow be explained in the body of the application. So making sure you go through, like, item by item and say, is that totally clear? It may be obvious to you, but making sure it's really clear to the panelists why it is that you're while you have that there. Then there's a question that says that if your total project expenses are more than $2,500, what other funds or resources do you have for the project? And this is just to make sure, like if you're trying to do a series, like a big music performance with a 22-piece band and you need $10,000 to be able to rent the venue and pay everyone. If Leeway is only giving you $2,000 of that $10,000, the panel wants to feel confident that you have a plan to close that gap of that other $8,000, because otherwise, maybe that $2,000 goes better to someone who that $2,000 could make a real big difference in them being able to complete the project. So you just need to fill in here if you have a much larger budget, like what is your plan to be able to actually do this project if you're given this money from Leeway, but you still need a lot more. And then the other question is just about whether this is your first grant or award, and this doesn't advantage or disadvantage you. It's purely just for our data tracking. We do find that more than 50% of people who get the Art and Change grant, this is the first time they've gotten any kind of grant or award. And so that question is just there for us to be able to continue to say that, because I do think it's a really great aspect of this grant that it is much more achievable than a lot of other arts funders grant opportunities out there. And we really do what we can to work with artists to help you succeed. So as I mentioned, myself and other staff members are not at all involved in the decision-making process, which frees us up to be able to give you feedback on your applications. We are, before every grant deadline, we do an applicant support session where all the staff goes off-site to a community center, and you can bring a draft of your application and we'll offer feedback. That application support is actually happening tomorrow, so that's July 18th at Amalgam Comic Book Shop up in Kensington. And the details are up on our website if you'd like more information, but you are most welcome to come through, talk out your idea more, or if you have a draft of your application, come meet with myself or another staff member one-on-one and get feedback. At this point, since we're so close to the August 1st deadline, that's probably your last chance to get feedback from any of us. But if you are applying in 2019 for the March 1st Art and Change grant deadline, you can absolutely contact us in January or February and set up one-on-one time with me to get help with your application. And then for the Transformation Award deadline, which is in May, later in the spring, you can contact us to set up some time. So I hope this has been helpful in answering some of your questions and giving you some guidance on the application process for the Art and Change grant. Again, if you're watching this broadcast after the live stream, you can still submit your questions and someone will get back to you. In the meantime, I wish all of you the best of luck. Thank you for your interpretation services, and thank you all for tuning in. Take care.